Hi, folks. This is Dakota Cohen here with the Building Your Permaculture Property podcast. And for today's episode, I'm going to be talking with Kevin Mullen, who is a specialist in kind of all aspects of green living when it comes to like the built environment. So how to basically make your houses as healthy as the outdoor environment. And before I introduced Kevin, I just wanted to tell a quick kind of joke that I think is quite kind of on point for tonight's conversation. Because for about 5 years, when I just got out of high school, I was taking my journeyman carpentry apprenticeship for to become a red seal carpenter. And so I worked with, I did everything from the foundation works with, concrete all the way up to the finishing work with, the, baseboards and cabinets and paint and tile and all that stuff. And, we built a lot of, really fancy custom homes for, McMansions. We also did kind of, cookie cutter houses, just like the song, little boxes made of ticky tacky. I did a lot of that stuff. We also did, renovations and everything. But one thing that the thing that actually got me, because I always wanted to be a carpenter growing up, but the thing that got me, pushed me away from the construction industry, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, is one of the patterns I noticed, whether we were doing renovation or building a house, didn't matter, that by the end of the job, there'd be a pile of garbage that was like a third the size of whatever the thing we were building. And it was my job to haul this stuff to the dump. And one of the things that I noticed on like pretty much everything that came into our houses, whether it was, the plywood or the shingles, the carpets, the tiles, the adhesives, the paints, everything, as you were unpacking it, there were these little labels that said, this product has been shown to cause cancer in the state of California. And, some, environmental act or protection thing, whatever. Whereas I noticed for several years and kind of kept my mouth shut. And one day I said to my brother, as if I had just saw it for the first time, I said, hey, check this out. Isn't this crazy that look at this label. It says that it causes cancer in California. My brother just looked at me and he smiled and he says, well, it's a good thing we're not in California then, isn't it?
Thanks for all that advice, brother.
So with that, Kevin, can you, why don't you tell us a bit about your background, why you got into this industry, about trying to get all these toxic chemicals out of our homes, and then we'll kind of take it into what you're doing now. But like, what was it about this that got you into this space?
Well, first of all, I guess I'm in the, kitchen and bath industry and have been for 30 years. We primarily focus on, kitchens and bathrooms and then I also got into the home construction industry in 2003, and we've been building and renovating, fairly significant houses ever since then. And so I've been to all the trade shows, international shows, national shows, regional shows. And so throughout that whole time, just being educated. And so 2013 comes along and we go on a family trip to South America, and we go to Quito, 10,500 feet. They said to climatize for the trip to the Galapagos, which I've never really understood because Galapagos is at sea level and we're at 10,500, but yeah, I never really thought about it when the tour guide told us that. Anyway, we stayed at this hotel, and in hindsight, this is kind of, what you do in a health crisis is you look back and say, well, what could have it been? And so we stayed at this hotel, and I'm pretty sure that they were lacquering in the hotel at the time, painting somewhere in the building, and I didn't think much of it. I was in the construction business, so it's just, kind of common, and got in the elevator and went out to the room and off we went. So wasn't feeling good. Didn't know if it was 10,500 feet not feeling good or something else. Anyway, we flew out, went to Galapagos, didn't feel well there. Went on to Peru, where we stayed in a yurt, which was just this natural built environment. Obviously had really literally mud and wood and, very natural, and felt great, and came back to Calgary and kind of hit or miss, kept going through a process and wasn't really sure. It was kind of, and, started to see doctors at that time. And as we, as time went on, now we kind of pull into, the end of June, and Calgary has a flood. And so, you kind of go into operation rebuild mode, and my house got flooded at that time. And so, I'm working on my own house, I'm working on my clients' houses, I'm working on friends' houses, consulting, going into houses. And so during that whole time, I didn't feel bad, because you're still, as much as there's probably a lot of bad stuff in the water at the time, you're not really thinking too much about it. You're just thinking about trying to rebuild your life, quite honestly. And so when we started to, rebuild these houses, one of the last things you're doing after you've kind of ripped it all apart, and I'm sure, I remember telling my wife she had to go to the cabin, get out of town, and because there was just literally, all the dust particles, asbestos particles and stuff, if we renovate a house with asbestos here today, it has to be, you have to get a permit for it. It has to be, the workers have to be protected. The house has to be protected. At the time of the flood, there was none of that. It was just rip it out, tear it out, throw it out, move it out. And so so you're exposed to that on its own. Then we get into flood mitigation, the flood mitigation, which is the mold mitigation that comes from all the water that's, in the house, and whether it's, dried naturally or, we brought in big blowers. And so you're kind of going through this process. So we get this mold mitigation product, and it's just absolutely intense. And all of us weren't feeling well. And it kind of it was one of those things that started to throw me over the top. And then as we got a little farther along and started to renovate our house, we did some spray foam insulation, and no one had ever said, hey, don't stay in that house when we've done the spray foam insulation. And, we just stayed there, and it was just probably another thing that threw me over the top. And then the dust and the drywall dust and just kind of accelerated, and I just couldn't, just didn't have time to recover. And it's kind of like the chemical that broke the camel's back in this case, or the builder's back, maybe in my case. Yeah. And so we, then we decided we'd move into a different house that I built. So we moved into it. It was probably about a year old at that point, so not too bad, but we bring in blinds, and, you have the off-gassing of the blinds and all the other furniture. That kind of, threw me into another loop, and off I went. And so I was fine if I was not around anything. But if you took me out for a walk, I'd be fine. If you brought me into a space that had something bad, I'd be off kilter. So I started to go see doctors, and I saw all the doctors. I saw a regular doctor, functional medicine doctors, chiropractic, acupuncture, natural healers, brain scan, internal medicine, lung tests, did it all. And so trying to just understand what it is. And when you're in a health crisis, that's what you're doing. You're going to see people, and you keep asking questions, and you're still trying to understand. And so as we kind of went through that, I got to this point where, I'm not really very effective at work. And then we had to move our buildings. And so this is really where the journey towards building healthier products started. My objective is that I had to build something so I could still go to work. So every decision that we were making was that something that caused me a reaction? Was it something that we could eliminate a chemical? We could eliminate a product. We found a product. What could we do so that when we walked into the building, that I wasn't going to be sick when all my staff moved there, and so that I could go to work. So every decision that we made, paint, the type of flooring material we use in the office space. So most office spaces have carpet. We have marmoleum, for example. It doesn't off-gas. We made those decisions around our new office furniture, around our ceiling tiles, so to make sure they didn't have formaldehyde or any other VOC content in them. So we painted our shop with non-VOC paint, painted our offices with non-VOC paint. And so all those decisions kind of, allowed me to show up to work on the first day and maybe be as useless as I was on any other day, but I was at least could go to work. And so that was a really big piece of how we kind of started on this journey of doing that. And I think the one thing that, that I learned was no one ever said, hey, this stuff isn't healthy for you. And none of my suppliers, none of the trade shows, none of the articles in general talked about it. And the other part is none of my clients ever asked me, is this healthy for me? And I think that at the end of the day, you're trying to give people good advice, but that was certainly at that time something that we couldn't give advice to. And I think that it was a good learning piece. And so throughout this process, I think the one thing is that my body reacted in a certain way, and if it was mold, I'd lose my voice. If it was a severe chemical, or we were spraying lacquer, I'd probably lose my voice as well. But then I'd get the shakes. And my kids called it the head bobs. I'd literally bob my head uncontrollably.
Really?
I would lose my speech would slow down to a point where no one would ever say, hey man, your speech really slowed down. But I knew that I was speaking slower and actually starting to slur. And so, you'd get a little freaked out, and it causes a lot of stress to your body again, and to your system. So, so I think it's kind of the best way to explain it is that it's kind of like having a peanut allergy, except I can assure you that there's a lot more chemicals in the world where you can get affected than there are peanuts in the world. And so you kind of try and understand that, and all the decisions that you make or revolve around that. Where you go on holidays, what hotels you can stay at, what products you can use. And that was kind of the beginning of the system. And so that's how we got to a point where, we started to build healthier homes, is because number one, I had to build it so that I could do something, in my office. And secondly, I'm stubborn enough that I still wanted to do my own projects. And through that, I wasn't smart enough not to do them. I just kept doing them. But through those things, I learned, other things that, that's not in the technical data, that's not in the, the industry magazines, that helped us learn how to build healthier homes as well.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's so funny how, like, particularly in the space that that I work in permaculture, everybody thinks that permaculture is always about the outside world, the plants and animals and earthworks and stuff like that. But when in reality, like, we spend most of our time, at least in the cold climate particularly, we spend most of our time indoors. And yet when most people go to build the house that they're going to spend the majority of their life in, I mean, well, even if you don't live in a cold climate, if you sleep more than 9 hours a day, like, that's half your life is going to be spent basically in one kind of a building or another. And we don't like, there's, at least from my experiences, there's very little consideration that most people give, even within like the green living space, to their homes. They'll plan out how they can have a chemical free yard, but they don't think of anything when it comes to the indoor environment. Like, why do you think that exists, Kevin? Like, is it just like a lack of information? Is it outright just like really good marketing? Or like, what do you think?
Yeah, well, marketing is an important part of it. And I think that, I call it ACE. And so what I mean by that is that A stands for awareness. And if you don't have any awareness about organic food, permaculture, good quality food, or you've never become aware of the chemicals that we build our built environments with, what we put on our, on our bodies, what we do with our, what we do for cleaning products, then you're never going to, you're not going to make any changes. Yeah. And that awareness comes in two areas. You either get educated from, a talk show like this, you have a health crisis yourself, or someone close to you has a health crisis. Yeah. And then from awareness, you become conscious of what's out there. And the more conscious you become, the better you are at making decisions overall into what products that you're going to use, in the construction of your home, beginning to understand what those pieces are, and then to, being conscious of, cleaning products, the body products you use, shampoos, all those different aspects that, before this challenge that I had, this health journey, I never even considered anything. I mean, I was using, the shaving cream that was propelled out by propane, to, I'm sure deodorants that, that aren't good for me, and all the other products that, that I use that, whether it was detergent or, the fabric softeners and all those different things that we take for granted, that we think is okay because they're marketed to us by companies that really aren't necessarily making the best decisions for us. And the third part of it's the environment. And as you become aware and you start making better conscious decisions, then as you're making those conscious decisions, you're obviously making better decisions, not only for yourself, but for the environment that you're going to live in and for the environment that, that those products get made in. And I think that, so that all is this circle of life of the product and eventually, our own circle of life as well. So it's important to you become aware. It's like watching a bad scene in a movie, you never get to forget it. And it's once you become aware of the chemicals that are used in our, in our built environment or in our food environment, then you become a lot more conscious of it.
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it there with the, like, unless, somebody's had a healing crisis themselves or they're, close to somebody who has, yeah, it's just really easy to remain ignorant to this stuff. And like, for me, it's kind of a blessing in disguise in that my whole family is very, very sensitive to these kinds of chemicals. Like, I remember when I was a little kid, it was a grade 4 or something, the janitors switched their cleaning product that they used to clean off our desks, and nobody mentioned anything. But like the first day, I like broke out in hives over my whole body. And it's like I had to, come home. We couldn't figure out what it was. For a while, we thought it was because I ate some red Smarties that day, and maybe it was red dye number 9. But eventually, we figured out it was this cleaning product they were doing, and then in the construction industry too. Like I would get bloody noses all the time. Same thing with you. Like lacquer was really bad. I remember one time I was at for like Skills Alberta. It was some like carpentry competition, and we were inside for like a 10-hour day, cutting pressure treated wood. And I remember by the end of the day, I could barely breathe. And as I was walking out the door that day, my nose just started like just pouring blood. And I was sick for a couple of days after that. And it's like all these different things. And eventually, like kind of like you, I started to put together that it wasn't working for me. But the big kind of symptom for me, and now that I pay the most attention to, is I'll get like really bad headaches, just like, crushing migraines and I never get them otherwise. But typically it's, when I'm in a building that's just had new carpet or new paint or some kind of renovation, and there's a lot of those VOCs that are in there. But I was curious, like you mentioned some of your symptoms, like the nodding of your head. I've never heard of that. Like, what are some other like common symptoms that that you've experienced or that some of your clients have experienced that like, have you started to put together like, oh, if you do this, it means that there's this chemical present, or is it like just like a broad thing that can help people see if they're, in a toxic environment?
Yeah, I think everyone reacts differently, right? I mean, I've got guys that can sit there and spray lacquer 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, and there are no problems. And I can go in and I can't even walk through the front door without starting to feel bad. Yeah. So everyone has their own tolerance to, the chemical warfare, I call it, that goes on in the world, and whether that's in the built environment or outside, but or in the farm environment, for example. I mean, we've become tolerant somehow of industry, industrialized farming, and other aspects that allow chemicals to be sprayed on our food, and then being processed and packaged and fed to us in some fashion. And it's really no different for the built environment. is those chemicals are used as binding agents for, your particle boards, for your plywoods, for your, the engineered floors, and so you have all these chemicals that are used in almost every fashion. And I'm also smart enough to realize that you can't get rid of it all. We're not going to go back to living in, dirt houses like they did in the, in the turn of the century, in the 1900s. But, but there are lots of better ways to do not only farming, but, the built environment. And it's making better choices, that fit your needs as an individual. And that's the important part. And so, I mean, I've got clients that, that have lung problems, and, they're just trying to figure out, how to work with that. They have other clients that have had other, autoimmune diseases that they're, they've kind of got better from, and, they're renovating. So, we're trying to help them, navigate this process of rebuilding, a home that they want without it, hopefully re-triggering something that occurred to them before. And so I think it's important that for some people, I've got clients that have kids that have asthma, so they have no carpet in their house, right? So everybody, again, reacts in a different fashion, and I think it's just helping them navigate through that to make the best decisions for them.
Totally. So like, would you say like, so like what you're saying is pretty much any symptom that, or most symptoms that people could have, could potentially be related to some kind of chemical in the built environment, that there's no kind of easily recognizable patterns. Is that, you'd say that's correct? Like it's,
so I want to be clear, I'm not a doctor, and though I tell my kids I am, but I'm not. And so, but everybody reacts in a different fashion. And I think that a lot of people don't really connect the fact that they walked into a friend's new house, and they didn't feel good while they were there, and they had a headache, or they were maybe a little shortness of breath, and they go outside and they start to feel a little better, the headache goes away, or they get a new car and they can't figure out why they don't feel good. And that was one of the things that triggered it for me. Was as I didn't know, I sold the car that I had for 7 years. I buy a new car.
Yeah.
I turn on the heat, and every time I turned on the heat, I was just like, what the hell? I feel terrible. I'd have to roll down the window. And so it became, and I remember taking it in and saying, it smells like like my car's burning. And the guy goes, what? This is a new car smell. Get over it, dude. And so again, it was just another step in understanding, the chemicals that were used in car construction and then home construction. And I think that, when you discuss it with somebody goes, well, yeah, I really react to, to perfumes, or I react to, I get headaches when I go into this friend's house, or, all these different things that when they start talking about it, they kind of realize that, they have some, mild issues as well. And they try and they don't even know that they're really actually having them, or that they're even having to manage them. So.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like, I know like for from the time that you first had your kind of first, chemical attack, where you like, at least you were first conscious of it, till the time where you were able to put, oh, that's what that is. That's why I've been feeling so crappy. Like, it sounds like that was several years. Am I right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so it was the same thing for me. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, how can we help people like fast track that wreck from like, that ACE, where you're aware of something and you become conscious of it and you start to shift that. Like, would you because I've spent way too much money on doctors, and I've had, for a lot of them, I haven't had a lot of benefit for the amount of money that I've put out, only to realize that it was just the shitty environment that I was living in. And all I had to do was, I didn't need more vitamins. I needed less poisons. So yeah, how can people fast track that process, or at least rule it out to see if it is even an issue for them?
I think the best way to do it is really discussions like what you and I are having, because most people don't know, or they're, I don't know, maybe they're just avoiding that discussion. And you know, we try and, as a society, try and pinpoint, you know, challenges into very specific categories. And I don't know that, you know, this isn't something, you know, when I went and got I remember going to, I went to the one doctor and said, you know, I'm kind of chemically sensitive, and he took the rubbing alcohol and jammed it on me anyway, and said, you know, just, he was the grumpiest guy ever, and you know, did the test, and there was really nothing from it. And then I went to, I couldn't get in here. I went to California. I went and someone knew, you know, somebody that could give me an allergy test, and I went to him, and you know, I thought this is going to be the perfect situation. I'm going to have all my answers at the end of this. I can't wait for it. And you know, they poked me 100 and some times on my back, and you know, and he comes in, he goes, "Yeah, you're not allergic to anything." And I go, "Well, what about the chemicals?" He goes, "Well, we don't test for chemicals." So, so it didn't really solve my problem, but it helped eliminate, you know, that it may not have been food, or at least not the foods that they, you know, that they were testing. It wasn't causing me allergic reactions in the sense of, you know, peanut butter or peanuts do for some people, but you know, it was still that challenge. So I think it discussion is the biggest thing, and for, you know, I think at the end of the day is for me is, you know, I have clients that come in, and some of them really actually, you know, are thrilled that we're doing it, and that it's even a discussion, because you know, it's not you know, it's not in the industry, you know, it's if you Google healthy homes or healthy home builders, you know, there's not a, it's a pretty rare breed. So I think it's just kind of this momentum and awareness, and as you know, as some of the people I've spoken to is that the next generation of homeowners, this younger, you know, teenagers and 20-year-olds and early 30-year-olds that are coming in, they have different needs and they have different wants than what my parents did. My parents, you know, they wouldn't even be a discussion for them. They just built the way it was, and off they went, and they didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
And so the younger generation thinks about the whole, you know, idea and equity of, you know, where it's coming from and who it's affecting, and how it's going to get used, and what the impact on the environment is, and those conscious decisions are going to get made, but they're going to really turn into the leadership roles, you know, in the future of the leaders of these companies. And then that's when we're going to see significant change, because those leaders are going to make different decisions as leaders of corporations. And I think that you know, is different than maybe some of the ones that we have today that are leading the organizations that are poisoning us one thing at a time.
Yeah. I mean, it's just thinking back to your story and how, you know, like you started to change your company when you couldn't work anymore. Like you had to do it out of necessity. And it was, you know, the same thing with my family as well. Like, you know, my dad, you know, they used to spray herbicides in cabless tractors, and you know, if the sprayer was plugged, you'd have to get off the tractor, like stop it, get off the tractor. There's the shutoff for the sprayer was off the tractor, so it's dumping out herbicide, and then you'd find the clogged nozzle, unscrew it with your bare hand, and blow it out with your mouth, and then put it back. And like my dad's like, he's been sick like 5 times in his whole life, and he's just bulletproof. But then like the younger generations like myself and like it seems like our immune systems aren't as strong, or either that, or the toxic buildup is just, you know, so high now that we just can't put up with it anymore. But so in a lot of ways it's bad, because you know we're suffering from it. But it's almost like, you know, when the canary in the coal mine finally does stop singing, we'll get the hell out of the mine before it blows up.
Yeah, I you know, canary in the home is what I say, you know, and so much so I trademarked it, so that, you know, so part of it is that, you know, for me, I counted, you know, as I was doing this and trying to understand, I went through about 18 projects for myself. Now, remember, I'm in the home building and kitchen and bath business. So, but I counted, you know, I lived in a house and renovated and sold the house and all these different projects. So I counted 18 projects significant projects that, you know, that I lived through in that last 30 years. and some of them were, month-long projects, and some were year-and-a-half-long projects. And so, you're constantly going into a construction site and then sleeping in it and spending the majority of your time, either at my offices, which I was doing, or, going into my home, which was new, and all the off-gassing stuff. So the average person doesn't do that. And so, some people live in the same house their entire life, and others, and don't do a lot of work to it. And so they're not continually exposed to the same things that I was, or, people in the construction industry. And so I think that, as a whole, we are, because we're consumers, and we consume products that are, the plastic bowls we use, the utensils that we use, sometimes, the cups that most people use. And so all those things continually, we're just continually exposed, that I don't think that any of us really are aware of. And so through that process, we only have glass containers for storage in our house. I only use stainless steel utensils. And, as I said to somebody, I said, the only plastic utensil we have is the one that we use for whipping cream. So I make sure I get it all. And so other than that, it's pretty much, metal utensils or glass containers. And so it's a very, I'm conscious of it, and so it's important. And it's just eliminating those small exposures, and the more things that you're eliminating, the better chance at a healthier life you have.
Totally. Well, and I like that little acronym that you've got, like the awareness, and then the being conscious of it, and then actually taking action of the changing your environment. Because the for me, is like, now that I know that I'm sensitive to it, and I'm aware of that, I listen to my body, and I can tell within seconds now, like when the neighbors are spraying, like I don't have to hear the tractor, I can just smell it. Mm-hmm. Or if I walk into somebody's house and they're using Lysol or Febreze, or it's instantly. And I mean, like, I don't make a big deal about it, but I try to live my life as much as I can, and maybe I'll hold my breath as long as I can before I can get out on the patio or whatever through the friend's house. But like scented candles are just like the death of me. I can't handle them. So I guess what are some other, I mean, we've talked about, some of the symptoms that you and I have gone through, but it sounds like, almost anything can contribute to that. What are some of the worst offenders in our homes with regards to these chemical sensitivities, like the things that people wouldn't really, expect them to have a lot of this off-gassing stuff?
Well, I think in general, probably the one thing that's used more than anything in the house is, there's two kind of main things in my mind, but one of them is paint. And for most people, when you go to the paint aisle, or you hire a painter, what's the one thing? The painter gives you a quote, and you say, oh, that sounds fair. And what's his motivation is to find the least expensive paint now to paint your house. So unless you give a very specific direction to the painter that I want a non-VOC paint, and it's going to be this brand, he's going to go choose the least expensive paint that works for him to paint your house as quickly as possible. So for us, one of the key aspects is, and when you go to that paint aisle and, in your, big box retailer, home retailer, there's no definition of what is, good, better, best for you. And so, a non, VOC compliant paint, for most people, would say, well, that probably sounds pretty good. It's VOC compliant. So off you would go. Well, that's just a government regulation that sets out, a parameter that paint has to be under a certain standard before you can buy it. And the next thing is low VOC. And you go, oh, well, low VOC is good for me. And well, it's okay. But then there's a non-VOC paint or no VOC paint, which, when you think about it, a VOC compliant paint's typically around 150 grams per liter, and a non-VOC paint is 0. And so, and remember, that's a liter, and the average can now is 4 liters. Yeah, not a gallon. It's typically 4 liters. And so you're looking at 0 versus 600 VOC. The average house needs 50 to 60 gallons of paint. And so, you have this enormous VOC load into a house right from its very beginning. And I'm sure you've been into a house or painted a room on your own, and you're kind of like, wow, that's really strong. And the rules of the paint are don't get it on you, which is hard. Don't ventilate the room. And I don't know if you ever painted when it's 40 below outside, but you don't open the room. You don't open the window to ventilate it.
No.
And so it's kind of that idea is that you need to actually understand it and research it, or hire someone that's going to be your champion in this issue of trying to find a better piece, right? And so we look at it as kind of a there's HRVs, which is a heat recovery ventilator. It brings in the heat and brings in the air and heats it and recirculates it. And we look at chemicals as the number one thing that we want to do is try and find something to eliminate it. And in some cases, you can severely reduce that chemical or toxic load, and paint's one of the key items. So our first goal is to try and eliminate whatever we can, whether that's in a glue or a resin, a silicone, a paint, a wood material, making sure that it's formaldehyde free, or that it's a water-based finish, whatever that is. So that's our first goal. Our second goal is if we can't eliminate it, then we want to reduce the chemical load. And in some cases, there is no choice, and you need to do it because of industry standard or government regulation, quality control for how it's going to react in terms of how it's going to stick to the wall. So that's the other part of what we're trying to do. And the third part, if we can't eliminate it and we can't reduce that chemical load or the toxic load of the product that's being used, then we want to ventilate your house as best we can to try and actually eliminate that and give you either fresh air through window openings, through better makeup air systems, through better filtration. The average house when they get built, I'm sure you've seen this at at Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, and you go in and they have these little filters, and there's ones that are $2 and they don't look really too good, and they're made out of fiberglass or whatever, and then there's other ones that capture more pollen and pieces, and they're higher better for collection of dust and particles and stuff. So I think at the end of the day, again, it's kind of looking, and in some cases people can't afford, can't do some of these things, but there are some simpler things to do. Change your filters more often, and just smaller pieces again, and eliminate. My daughter, I'm sure, can't wait to move out so that she can actually put a scented candle in her room. But those are in some cases those are natural, in other cases they're not natural, and I think that becomes part of it is that we look at industry marketing to us, and I call it the scentification of society. And you can sit there and watch a TV show, and what comes on but Febreze to spray into the air, and I'm going to spray it over my expensive furniture, and I'm going to spray it on my expensive carpet, and I'm going to spray it on my drapery, and maybe my dog and my kids, and then everybody's going to smell just fantastic, and you won't smell anything else but that product. And so whether that's an aerosol, a spray, a cleaner, whatever, but when you actually look at it, society has tried to create a memory sense. And I remember reading this article in Forbes, and I'm talking probably 20 plus years ago, and it was kind of at the beginning of the front end, and long before I ever even thought that chemicals were an issue, is that when you go into a retailer, you go into a hotel chain, you go into whatever, they all want to have their own scent, so that when you go into that store or you smell it somewhere, is that you have this great feeling that you were at the latest, big chain, and so they pump that scent into it.
It's like a brand, like it's part of
their brand. It's part of their brand, and then
scent. That's crazy. I never thought of that, but it's so true. Every store in the mall. I haven't been to a mall for years, but every store smelled different.
Yeah. So when you come out of Chinook Center here in Calgary, you just smell like a big potpourri, because you've been in every retailer that's got their own, branded scent, and you're overwhelmed. If you're in a situation like me, you become overwhelmed. So it's just kind of that, but when you look at how society has, we look at, the fabric softeners of the world, the aerosols of the world, the air fresheners that you're going to put in the bathroom. So, so it doesn't smell like a bathroom, I guess. And so as you keep going through all these aspects, all those things aren't, those aren't baked cookies that they're throwing around at you. They're a combination or a culmination of a bunch of chemicals that are created to create the scent. And that the idea of the term fragrance is actually the thing that people should be, not every term fragrance is, some people say is bad for you, but fragrance in general is a way for industry to hide their scent in it. And so when you go to a fabric softener, I went to one fabric softener company, and as you try and get to their formulation, and you get to their material data sheet, and after you on the fourth website, I finally found the actual data that they had for the term fragrance. And when you open that up, it went to I think it was about 45 pages of chemicals, and it would make up any one of 2,000 chemicals.
Wow.
And right down from milk and different pieces, but basically it was 2,000 different chemicals could be used in any combination to make the term fragrance. And so you kind of get this.
Wow.
You get the. I mean, I remember the shock and awe of just clicking on that, and then the pages just kept coming at me.
Yeah.
And there is no way that any corporation can really know what that impact on the individual is, and what that is in terms of, and like I said, every individual is different, and some people will never affect them, but we actually don't know what that long-term impact is of that product. No. that we're just throwing on every piece of our clothing and everything. So those are, we have nothing that has the term fragrance on it that I can help, or I know my, it gets, they try and sneak it into my house, but I'm like a sniff dog. I can find it and kick it out right away. So
yeah, totally. That's insane. So you were saying there's like in a VOC compliant paint, there'd be like 600 grams of
VOC content.
VOCs in like
in a gallon of paint.
1 gallon of paint, and there'd be 60 gallons in an average size house.
Yeah. That,
I mean, like you're talking, that's over a pound per gallon. It's like 1.5 pounds per gallon of VOCs.
So it's just that VOC content, the volatile organic compound that creates the smell that you smell when you go into the house. And if you paint it with a non-VOC paint, you wouldn't even know the painter was in the house in most cases. But so you might smell from the moisture, but you don't smell from the paint.
Totally. But I mean, like, just like you think about that though, is like, I mean, just kind of a gross analogy, but it's like, when you smell somebody's fart, like you're literally like, it's, fecal particles coming into your nose. But like, it's the same thing with these VOCs, except with a fart, like there's not a pound of it or 1.5 pounds per gallon. That's literally has to, because like, I guess here's a better question is like, does 100% of those, volatile organic compounds, do they all off gas over their lifetime, or does some of them get actually locked into the paint? Or
well, some of it stay there. I mean, in some cases, I've been on projects where a painted cabinet that's closed, somebody might not smell it, but when I open that door, I can smell it. Yeah. And so, it's the VOC of the paint is, it'll dissipate over time, but it's, but it's still, if you can find a way to reduce that, the toxic load in the house, then, go ahead, right? Yeah. I mean, paint is still a byproduct, a petrochemical byproduct. It's not, it's not, you can buy different products and do different things, but paint as we know it, and as society knows it, which is, in general is a petrochemical base. But the reality is that there's more information on a can of soup than there is on a can of paint. The can of paint doesn't really tell you much, other than you have to actually read through what they're trying to communicate to you, whether it's VOC compliant or low VOC or no VOC, and try and navigate through that without a lot of information on the sales floor where you're trying to buy it at.
Yeah.
And most of the people that we talk to, and we're working on on a project here, and and when you'd go, my staff would go to the paint store and ask the question about it. Even the people that are selling the paint really don't even have the answers for you. So if you're not doing it yourself, you're going to have a tough time.
Yeah. I mean, like that's just like when you really start to think about it, where it's like if you can smell it, like it means that you're literally like you're taking it into your body, like you're essentially consuming it. And then when you start talking about like the amount of it that is just from the paint alone, and then all the other things that are in your house is from the stains and the floorings and the um the one of the worst things that I remember actually was the like appliances and fixtures, like when you got into like unpacking the like light fixtures, or the like the the stuff that like bathroom closet hangers and all that stuff that like just comes in packages. Is like everybody, like it's like that Amazon smell where you open the box from Amazon and it just smells like, I don't know, that must be what China smells like or something, because it's just that visceral chemical metallic smell. And like almost all of the fixtures and appliances that I remember putting into houses, they all had that when you open the boxes.
Yeah, so I think from the factory floors that I've been on, the reality is the moment that it's finished, it gets wrapped and packed.
Yeah.
And so it has no time to actually off gas at the factory level before it's packed and shipped to you as a homeowner.
Yeah.
And then you open that box, and for some people, they just go, oh, that they don't even just they don't react to it. And so I think I'm trying to be conscious. I still try and live. I still I got to buy a computer. I got to have a microphone, and but I can tell you when this first came out of the box, it was high VOC. It's a couple months old. I can sit around it now, but it takes time for things to off gas. And the more, the more product, we're a consumer society. So we're always going to be bringing things into our house in general, right? I mean, and as you are, it's being conscious of that and whether or not you even need it. I mean, if you want to protect the environment, don't buy stuff. That's that ultimately is the, is the best use, but that, society still wants to move forward. We all want to. So I think it's being conscious of the decisions that you're making every time you do buy something, and how it's going to do. And so when I buy something, lots of times, I bought a new car. It sat in my garage for months with the windows down so it could off gas before I would go drive it. And then even to this day, it's a 3-year-old car. I still drive it with the window down, probably 95% of the time, much to the chagrin of my family. But I can actually feel the difference when I have the windows up and the heat on. And then if I roll down the window, then I'll reset essentially. And so that it's just kind of this evolution. And, as a friend of mine said, in, kind of three or plus years into the journey, who had early onset Parkinson's. And at that point, she's maybe in her mid 40s. And she said, Kevin, you're just going to have to learn to live with it. Right. Like, I'm pissed off because it's kind of affecting me and what I could do and where I could go, and should just learn to live with it. Like, I got to live with this, like, and I don't think it would have been as impactful if somebody else said that to me, quite honestly, if, but because of the way she said it and my respect for her and understanding the challenges that she's had, it made it, it kind of, I got a Mike Tyson hit to the side of the head, and I went, okay, like, let's reset about this and think about this. And, what do I have to do to do it? And what other tools can I do and to try and, mitigate, the challenges that I'm having.
Yeah, totally. Well, but I really do think that, like, as awareness and consciousness grows and we start to, we start to shift our decisions, like you said, our environment will actually change. Like if people stopped buying, VOC compliant paint, they wouldn't make it anymore. And same thing, if people stop buying these things that are, and it's difficult right now because, like, if there's only one game in town, like, you're kind of stuck. But that's the part that I love about business is that like and capitalism is that we get to vote every time we spend our money for what we want and what we don't want. And so like that's I'm actually hopeful that we can move forward and slowly eliminate some of these stuffs. And like you said before, education is the first step. You have to be aware that there's actually even a problem, because most people, they just, something goes wrong, they go to the doctor, they get a pill to numb the symptoms, and it's just business as usual.
Yeah, and even that in a lot of ways doesn't solve the problem. I think that industry is there as a return on equity, a return to shareholders, especially in the public vehicle, which is really where majority of our products get made from, is the public entities of the largest corporations in the world are the ones making the majority of the products that we consume for our houses, and they're out there as a return on equity and a return on capital. So if industry changes and says, and one of the big things that I talked about with someone today was, look, he said, at the end of the day, within a 10-year period, they went from having formaldehyde as a component of pink insulation to it's not being an insulation anymore. And I think the most important thing he said was more, do you want to be the last guy to specify the last bale of insulation going into that house? Or are you actually going to move forward and choose a better product for your people? Yeah. Because ultimately, that's really what it's about. And that decisions come from, homeowners saying, I want this. And so the industry has to meet that demand and ultimately, help the market move in the right direction, which is, less exposure, less toxic products into the homes that we live in. So
yeah, well, so like on that note, you were one of the things that you mentioned kind of offline was that like there's a certification now that in some of your products and projects have been a part of this. It's called Green Guard, and I'm not familiar with this, and I'm guessing most of the audience is here. So can you explain what this Green Guard certification is and the different projects and products that you have now that are certified under that new standard?
Yeah, so I had a homeowner that had a son that had a fairly rare cancer, but they wanted to build a house, and she was an engineer by trade and wanted to really focus her whole house on building a healthy home. And I had built a house for her before, about 15, 17 years ago, something like that. And so when they went to build this new house, she said, hey, I want to build this healthy home. And she knew that I had some health challenges, and so and what we were doing in terms of our showroom and how we were progressing. And so we worked together on a lot of areas of trying to research information, and she helped us connect with it's called UL Green Guard, and UL is like a certifier. And so UL Green Guard tests products for companies and lays out guidelines that corporations can follow. And one of them is UL Green Guard for cabinetry, and there's a certification, so you can get to, in our case, we got to UL Green Guard Gold, which means that we, it's low formaldehyde, low exposure, low VOC. And then the other one that for her home that we did, and one of the reasons I think we qualified was that we had our cabinetry in there that eventually met UL Green Guard Gold, and then every decision that went into her home, from right from the very beginning right to the very end, was about what was the what would be the health consequences and what's the toxic load of it. And so we made all those decisions very conscious and managing the products that were going in, managing the trades that were working in the house, and managing how it got executed on, and making sure that we tried to meet this guideline of UL 3036. Now that's not a very exciting name by any stretch, but the reality is that that's what they called it. And so we have the first home outside of Japan that's ever qualified for that. And so our qualification, there's two kind of main qualifications. They go through all the different products that go into it. They check all these other necessities to make sure that you don't have any potential water penetration and so on. But the two that that we're most concerned about and that we've always focused on as a company is formaldehyde and on VOC content. And so our goal was to reduce that, and we beat the VOC content, which is by almost 50% off the standard that they had, and our formaldehyde was north of 60%, almost 70%, and in terms of the average for the two floors. So we really were able to do that in combination with the ventilation in the house, and then all the products that we eliminated or reduced the toxic load into the house, and so that's a really important piece. And so every house is going to be a little bit different. Every decision that every client's going to make is a little bit different. But the reality is that we could meet this very difficult guideline that no one else has ever met except in Japan, and we're just a little kitchen and home building company here in Calgary, but because of our focus and our desire for it, for both and the client's desire for it, we were able to meet that requirement.
That's fantastic. Congrats. That's a huge achievement. So like what was that? What was the testing process like? Was it kind of like a blower air door test where they just sealed the whole house off and sucked air out, or what did it look like to figure out how much formaldehyde and VOCs you had in the house?
Yeah, they bring in a basically little. Yeah, they just bring in little test tubes essentially, and they circulate through the air for a specific amount of time, and they take those tubes, they send them off, and then they look for VOC content, formaldehyde, and then particulate matter. So they're looking for different aspects that would show up, and then those products can also show what kind of chemicals that are show up in the house and through the testing. So I'm not the technical guru on that. I have a gentleman that works for me that's the into the weeds of that, but the basic is that it's basically an air test that goes through a test tube for a period of time, and then it gets sent off, gets tested, and then from that we can determine the VOC content, formaldehyde, and other chemicals that are used in the house.
Interesting. Okay, so some theoretically somebody could do this for like a house that they were living in now if they wanted to see what their chemical load is to kind of rule that out if it was a health concern. Is that something anybody can do, or is it difficult to access? What's the cost of that?
That's a really good question. And so you can we've done it here. We just did it for a gentleman. We just sent it off this week, and it was an old house that he had renovated about 28 years ago or something like that. And it was one of the first kitchen jobs that I ever did. So that's how it started. And we had a discussion about a year and a half ago, and he ended up in a health crisis after that. And he just happened to phone me here about 10 days ago and said, "Hey, Kevin, I know you have this sensitivity, and I'm having this lung issue. What can you help me out? Like, what can we do?" And I said, "We'll come over. We'll do an air test on your house." And so we're just waiting for the results on that. But the idea is that we're looking for so we're doing a radon test in his house because Calgary's has a high radon level, and Alberta does. Yeah. And then we're doing a testing for mold, and then just for whatever chemicals that that will show up in the air test as well. So every house is a little bit different, and so it's not. I don't have the cost of that off the top of my head, but it's certainly something that's possible, and it just it's just in our world, it's just another piece of information that helps you make better decisions down the road. And that's if you have an older house, or you have somebody's not feeling good in the house, it might be a water penetration, it might be mold that's not visible, that's somewhere behind, or lots of people, I can't tell you how many houses I've been to where people say, "Well, we've had this little leak in the corner, and it's not been really too bad, and there's just a little bit of black stuff on the drywall." Well, that's mold. And so so everybody's a little bit different again, and what they find tolerable is different again. So
Totally. Well, I mean, I'm actually glad you brought that up because I never even thought of it. But like one of my good buddies, he's been going through just a terrible health crisis the last couple of years, and he's been diagnosed with everything under the sun. But time comes to start doing the treatments, he wasn't improving, and eventually they realized that he has a severe mold allergy from a house that I think he was the house he grew up in, and he's so sensitive to it now that he literally can't be in a building that has any mold in it whatsoever. And so he's trying to rent a house or try to find a place that he can live. But I think these mold tests are a couple or $1,000 a pop at least or whatever. But it's been really difficult for him. But I think now that he's found a place, he's slowly kind of rebuilding his house or his health. But it's that's something that we're not even we're not bringing that into our houses consciously. That's more of the way the houses are built, whether that's not putting the vapor barrier in the right place, or not having flashing done properly, just little things like that, and it can create it can kill you. It can ruin your health.
It can ruin your health, and ultimately that's really that's the key thing that we all need. And I had a book that I bought years ago, and it was called Younger Next Year. And the idea being that, if you exercise a little bit more, did a little, ate better, but primarily exercise, that, next year, your body, you might be older, but your body would be younger.
Yeah.
And so, the idea that the next year is that you'll be healthier next year if you make some of the things that we talked about here today, which is eliminating, toxic pieces that are, that we take for granted, that come into our house and that we're using in the cleaning of our house, that we're using on our bodies, and the type of food that we eat, and if you keep reducing all those exposures and toxins that go into your body, then hopefully you're healthier next year rather than worse off next year.
Totally. Well, and I mean, that's I believe that all disease stems from stress, whether that's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's environmental. And so if you want to have health, you have to remove the chronic stresses and allow your body to heal. But if you're constantly getting beat down, like if every breath you're taking is bringing in some kind of a toxic element in your body, your body's never gonna have a chance to go through that rebuilding process, like you're saying. So one of the other question I want to ask you, Kevin, was coming back to your client where you got the UL Green Guard certification, the first building outside of Japan. Just to give people some ideas, like what would be the cost difference if somebody was just to build like your standard home, like obviously similar level of furnishings, but if they were just to switch to these healthy home products and the way that you guys are building them, what would be the cost difference between those two styles of building?
Yeah, so every person has their own kind of what I would call interior design needs in terms of what they find important. And in this house, we had a lot of millwork details.
Yeah.
That was outside that. But so my best analogy of that is that something, when we first started down this road of trying to find healthier materials, we said, look, you can buy formaldehyde free MDF. And so we went to our supplier and he said, well, we don't have any of that. And I said, well, I know it's available. He said, yeah, but you got to buy a truckload of it. And he said, well, we're not buying a truckload of it because we need to know if it's even going to work with the systems that we have here internally, and how it's going to spray, and how the finish is going to sit to it, and what we have to do to it. So anyway, we eventually got some. They finally brought some into us, and I remember my shop manager coming up to me and going, okay, so what do you think the difference is between a sheet of MDF that has formaldehyde in it and one that doesn't? I said, I don't know, $10. He goes, 50 cents. And so that the idea that, healthier products are available, and they're, a non-VOC paint is more than a VOC compliant paint, and it might be, depending on the manufacturer, $15 or $20 a gallon or whatever. But so that is going, depending on the value of your home, the size of your home or whatever. But that is just one of those pieces that you can easily multiply that out based on what you find important. If you're repainting your home, or just repainting if you're just repainting a bathroom, it's a gallon paint, it's $15 or $20. I can tell you that it's going to be a lot better for you. And so part of it is that a regular tube of silicone might be $2.95 at Home Depot, and the specialty product that essentially will, for silicone in most cases, is keeping it something just in place so it just doesn't fall off. That the specialty tube might be $6, but you're not dropping hundreds of those tubes in a house. You're only dropping a few. So different needs, different size, different style of houses require different materials. And so and some clients, I know that I shouldn't eat my burgers and fries from Five Guys and Fries, but I still do because I still like it. And so for some people, they'll still make some decisions, conscious decisions that say, that's what I really want from a look or style or finish. So I'm willing to sacrifice, some of these things that you're telling me about, Kevin, because that's what I really want from a look or style standpoint. And then other clients just say, look, my only decision is what is the health conscious aspect of this? What's my decision? What is it? How am I going to do it? So, and so every house is different. A tile floor is an organic product. It's not going to off-gas, right? But if you put a stone in and then you got to put a sealer on, well, you got to deal with the sealer and what's the right sealer, and there are high VOC content sealers, so every decision is an exploration with the client, quite honestly. And at the end of the day, it's, you have to become your best advocate for yourself, because industry in general isn't out there. The government's not telling us a lot about it. They've never, when we were dealing with the NRC, the National Research Council of Canada, at the time, they were just going to start testing for the first time what the VOC content of a house was during construction, post-construction, and then post-possession. And so no one's testing for what it means for the health of the homeowner. And so you have to become your own best advocate, and you have to, worry about yourself, you have to worry about your family, and at the same time, you're gonna be worrying about the environment. And I think that's the best method of building a home.
Totally. But it sounds like these aren't, it's not like a house is going to be 50% more to build a healthy home versus, like, we're talking, on some products, it's, fractions of a cent versus other ones, might be, like the silicone or something. Like, it might be double the cost, but typically they're not big.
Very small. And I think at the end of the day, the homeowner, can decide. My job isn't to tell the homeowner how much money they can spend. It's their job to tell us how much money they want to spend on something. And so everybody has their own capability and their own needs, and whether it's their own or, we had someone in here the other day that, she said, my daughter has asthma, so it's really important to me that, I don't, send her into a tailspin because we move into a new house. And so I think it's just, again, it's being conscious of it. And I don't think, and then, and exploring it and determining what's best. And so, you can buy a $2 tile, and you can buy, tile to your heart's content, I call it. And so, but they're basically going to be, they still have the same objective. And so the price of your house is depending on the products that are being used in the house. But the fundamentals of those choices are, there are healthier products that are competitive in price to something that's not as healthy.
Totally. So, like, what would you say that like barring, some of those more expensive kind of aesthetic decisions, it would be totally possible to build like a really nice house with, let me put it this way. Would it be possible to build a really nice house that would still meet that Green Guard certification without going, crazy outside of the budget? Like, what would that cost to build like a low cost home that would still meet Green Guard standards?
You're like all my customers, Dakota. You don't know how much your house is going to be without what the specification is.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day is that, when you're looking, and I'm not avoiding your question, but everybody's house is different, and everybody's budget's different, and their location is different. And there might be somebody here from Texas, there might be somebody here from Florida, there might be somebody here from northern Alberta listening to this podcast, and so each one of those areas is a little bit different.
Yeah.
The reality is that you can have a beautifully built, healthily built home for not a lot more money, but you have to be making those conscious decisions as you're doing.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing that's really standing out for me is it's not so much like a massive increase in price, it's a massive increase in like research and like decisions and like, I mean, I know from working with our past clients and also being involved in renovations myself, like decision fatigue is huge, and it's just so easy just to hell with it, just go with that one. But it sounds like that's where like one of the major services you provide to your clients is helping them to navigate these decisions and figure out what are the priorities that you really want to stay away from, like the paints and the the high formaldehyde products versus the other ones where like, what, these ones, it doesn't really matter, you can choose that. Like, is that kind of one of the things that you provide to your customers? Or
Yeah, for sure. We give them advice. That's why you're going to choose us, so that we think that we give you good advice, that we help you make the right decision within the budget that you've provided, and the interior design look and style that you want. So whether that's a painted finish or a wood, or how we're going to do that is either water-based, or it's a laminate, or it's a painted surface. All those different aspects come into the play, because what you want in your house is different than what I want in my house, which is different than what my brother wants in his house. And so ultimately it's trying to find that balance between the look and style and fit and finish that you want, but knowing that you can have the best interior designed house using beautiful products and beautiful finishes without a sacrifice. And so my analogy is that, in the food business and in the restaurant business, and, everybody wants to know, when you're going to, in general, higher end restaurants, it's farm to table, right? I want to know where the food is. I wanted to know, who that grower was, and that he's respecting my ability to build, to have raised that product, that beef, that chicken, that produce, so that it's the least toxic, that, and that's really kind of the concept in my mind anyway, and that it's ending up on your table and you're having the freshest materials that are there. Yeah. And so my analogy is that, for us, we're kind of providing the same thing, and I call it foundation to possession. And so, at the end of the day, we're here to provide advice right from the foundation, right through to possession, to try and build a house for you that's, as healthy as we can build it for you within the parameters that each homeowner chooses it to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so like, do you have, like, you've been doing this for a few years now. Have you had any, big success stories in terms of some of the clients that have, moved into your houses? Like, have you, like, basically, can people tell a difference? Like, is it worth the hassle to do this stuff?
Yeah, the hassle really isn't to the homeowner, just to be clear. The burden lies with us as your contractor. Yeah. And then secondly, it lies with the tradesmen and women that work on the job site, and that they are paying attention to the policies and the procedures that we want you to follow, And more than anything, the materials that we want you to use when you're using adhesives, primarily, painting materials, and those type of things. So we can tell, my granite guy, my plumber, my HVAC guy, and the owners, and they all shake their heads, and then they send the first tradesman out, and we check with him, and he says, "Yeah, I got it, I understand." And then the next day, a different crew comes in to do the same work, but they've never been told. And so you're on constant. I trust that they're doing what they said they were going to do, but we always verify it. We're looking at the paint cans when it's being painted. We're looking at what do they have for the tubes that are being used for, the caulking, what they're using for the adhesives for the, for the flooring. We're looking at the silicones, replacements that they're using, right down to, complaining to our mirror guy the one day, just prior to our air test for the one house was, they were using Windex, on the glass. And I mean, it was in a house that there's no chemicals, really. And then you throw, a high VOC product like Windex in there. I mean, I was like, I said, I was livid, quite honestly. But it's this constant vigilance of working on behalf of the homeowner, and so the burden isn't so much theirs, other than they're going through the same thousands of decisions that are going into the actual product and selection, but not necessarily the actual management of the team that's going to be building their house.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. But I guess in terms of success stories with your client's house, like you've mentioned, you've had a few people that have approached you with cancers and asthmas and stuff like that. Like those people, when they move into your their new kind of healthy homes, do they notice a big difference?
Well, I think the one thing is that this is relatively new, in the big picture. So the house that we just finished, we finished it last September, and then of course we're going through the COVID lockdowns, start, stop. And so, we really haven't been able to highlight that maybe as much as we'd liked, and it was delayed for a long time because of it. And people have other health concerns rather than listening to the healthy home story. But the house, the client that moved into the healthy home, they're thrilled. She actually put in a testing system that's built right in, hardwired into the wall, that tells her VOC content, her the particulate matter, the temperature, the humidity, and she can see that anywhere in the world, and you can actually tell what's going on in the house at any given time. So so she was it showed how effective her ventilation system was, because when the smoke rolled in this summer, we had relatively few smoke days in Calgary this year, but they have these big opening doors, and they had them open, and then the smoke just kind of rolled in fairly quickly one day, and the particulate matter went from 1 to 65 within, or 60 plus, right away. And so she closed all her doors and closed all her windows, and the ventilation system kicked in, and she went back to her monitoring system, and it went right back to 1. And so there's ways to mitigate and try and improve the air quality, and that's through again through ventilation, which is one of the key things. And so each house is different, and how the system's set up is different, but it's another way to clean up the air quality of your house. So
yeah, absolutely. No, that's fascinating. I'm just thinking, I know I've seen like the charts where they show like the different levels of particulate in the air, and I think like my friend, it's like several hundred parts per million or whatever is when things get really dangerous. Like I think China pre the Olympics, when they really cleaned everything up, it could be like 700 parts per million there, but that's like you're basically in a house that's on fire. But have you done any more of those like those parts per million tests in terms of
we're trying a different system in one of our houses that we built, that's built on a healthy basis, and we just thrown it in there just actually this week to start seeing a different system, trying it out, seeing what it tells us, so we can see. And then we're actually going to put in a charcoal filter on the system, and then just see what kind of difference that makes over the next 2 or 3 weeks as well. So we're actually just, this is green shoots, right? In the big picture, right? This is the little green shoots, and we're at the very front end of this. There's really not a lot of people, in the construction industry talking about it, doing anything about it. And certainly, and we're learning about it every time. And the more, the more we can learn, the happier, I am and understanding it. And so it allows me to help other people. That's really what, that's what this is about. Is I don't, I want to help people so they don't ever have to go through what I've gone through, because it's not only difficult on myself, but it's difficult on, the people that are surrounded around you. And in my case, my spouse and my kids, they're affected on what we can do, or, sometimes where we can go, or how long we can stay there. And, same with my staff, we have a no scent policy in here, to try and manage that as well. And so it affects everybody else when you're doing this. But in some cases, some of the people that I work with, they do a great job. They listen to, our concepts, and they're trying to improve their lives and their, and their health at the same time. And for other, they don't care. And so I think that, the success stories are going to come because we're at the front end of this, and being able to take what we've learned over the last, really what I've learned over the last 8 years, what we've actually been working on over the last 4 years, almost 4 years, 3.5 years now, and apply that to, real world construction, and then having, real world results and testing results from it, then we can actually keep moving it forward. Because, it's one thing to talk about it, it's another one to prove it. And then it's also another one to, to duplicate it over and over again. And it's, again, every house is different, every client's different, every budget's different. But, we want to help people live, and build a healthier life. That's ultimately the goal.
Yeah. I mean, it's just as you're kind of talking about the fact that you're at the early stages of this, it kind of reminds me you're almost where the organic and kind of regenerative agriculture movement was. Hopefully it's not 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but that's when my parents first got into it. And that was over 30 years ago, but they were really the pioneers for quite a few years. But now, every week I'm getting, contacts from, the big players, like, there's land investors, there's an organization called Regeneration Canada now. Like it's finally mainstream now to think about, the chemicals that we're putting on our food, but we still got this gap where it's like, yeah, but we're not thinking about the chemicals that we're putting in our house. And so I don't know, like, what do you think that the time span is going to take before, those green shoots are starting to bear fruit and this is more mainstream and it's been scaled up? How, if you had to make a prediction?
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to take, a generation of leadership.
Yeah.
And when I say that, the next, 35-year-old, the next Elon Musk that comes in and that recharges the building industry and changes the mandate of the corporate body and what they're producing and how they're producing it. And so I think, industry will change as we saw at the grocery store. We saw them change, from, there was a little section that had organic on it, or maybe a little area that said organic on it, or maybe it said non-GMO, which many of us didn't even know what that meant 10 years ago. Or what was glyphosate, or what is Roundup, and what are these things? And so I think that ultimately what we're going to see is that as the consumer becomes more aware, industry will change as they have in the agricultural world to, and the grocery store aisle to meet the demand that the consumer wants for a healthier life. And that will transform into the home, the home construction industry and construction in general. And it does in the commercial world, because big businesses are trying to attract people by saying, look, we have a healthier space for you to come to work in, because we've focused on you and your health and wellness, whether that's through providing food or relaxation spaces, or just look at what a great built environment we have. And so that's the the Googles and the Apples and the big companies in the world can afford to do that. The reality is that they set the trend, demand and demand, so the corporations actually start to pay more attention to it and then provide it to the industry as a whole, and which eventually ends up in our private homes.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kevin, like where, I mean, this is obviously like I know it's a new space but there's so much to learn. Where would you recommend people go to find out more information about this space of healthy homes? Where can people find out more info?
Well, it's not, to me, my mission isn't just about healthy homes. I think it's about a healthier life.
Yeah.
And I think that, because the home is the built environment, but it's also what you're using inside that environment. Yeah. And then eventually what you're doing, using inside the house, and then you're using on your own body. And so, for me, there was some great organizations that, that I looked to at the time, trying to understand, from the cleaning world and body products and stuff that I was using, cosmetics that my wife was using, and those type of things. And that is ewg.org. And they'll, in general, you can put in the name of a product and they'll give you some information. They have lots of different guidelines, and it's just on their site the other day. It's endless amounts. There's so much more information about what you can do, and just on that website compared to 5 years ago is unbelievable. The Healthy Building Network is designed around trying to provide information to industry, to designers, architects, builders, developers, that type of thing, and have great databases and information that you can go to on that. And I think they're just another a huge source for that. And I think that ultimately it's there's all kinds of different websites, but those are for me those are two great ones. I'm doing I'm doing the Parsons Healthy Materials Lab course. It just started today for me, and just trying to understand it a little bit better. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but I do understand, after going through this health journey, is that people need to become more aware, and this is I guess a mandate that I've taken on to just try and help people understand it. I've got all the experience in the world in the construction industry. I've worked on great houses for 30 years and deal on all the different levels of products and services that we provide, bathrooms, kitchens, and all those those things that make our houses livable and enjoyable and for us to entertain and live in. And so that taking all that knowledge and then combining it with what I've learned through this health journey is it's going to help people, and I think that the more we can communicate that with people, hopefully we can touch some great lives and make them better for them.
Absolutely. One, and you've got a website where people can go and find out more information, and you've also got a podcast where you talk about a lot more, everything from healthy homes to healthy living, like you were just talking about. Where can people go to find out more information about that?
Yeah, so again, we're in the green shoot stages of our podcast, and it's called Build a Healthier Life. And we've been able to, in a short period of time, connect with really some of the some great, thought leaders, product innovators, and change makers. People like yourself and people from Parsons and Healthy Building Network and other areas that I just learned every time I talk to somebody. I just learn a little bit more, become a little bit more confused, and but become a little bit more inspired that that build a healthier lives on the right path to be able to consolidate the information that people need and will desire to try and extend their life without challenges and be not just younger next year but healthier next year.
Absolutely. And then your website is empirecustomhomes.com, is that right?
That's right. And then our empirekitchenandbath.com, and then we're on Instagram for both of those as well. So awesome.
Well, Kevin, do you have any last words for folks before we close out?
Well, I think, at the end of the day, I think it's, you just have to make that, you have to be your own advocate for your own, your own healthy life and get out there and understand what, you're choosing, whether it's, personal products, cleaning products, building products, and whatever you're bringing into your house. And at the end of the day, I hope a little bit of the information that we provided today helps you and build a healthier life, and that you're even healthier next year. So
totally. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for sitting down with me today. And it's I left kind of the construction industry because I was so overwhelmed by how shitty it was, and also because I was starting to get drawn more towards agriculture. But I was thrilled to meet up with you and hear about how you're trying to do the same thing that I'm trying to do with agriculture, with the built environment. And so it's really inspiring to hear some of your work and some of your success already, even though you're in the early days, and hopefully it doesn't take you 30 years before there's
another 30.
Yeah, another 30 years, totally. Well, anyways, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.